Hey everybody, it's Emily at ARG Schooling, and this is the start of my Reading Cybils Finalists vlog. I was a judge in 2022, and I did the first round of Cybils. And I had such a great time. If you're not familiar, the Cybils Awards is a children's book award where it's judged not by some, like, I don't even know, superior being, but they're judged by people in the book industry themselves. So vloggers, children's librarians, people who read books for kids for a job. So I was lucky enough to get to be a judge back in 2022. And I had a great time. I wanted to be a judge this year for 2023, but my schedule wasn't going to let it work out. I had too much already going on in the fall, so I had to decline. But I still wished I could have done it, so I thought it would be fun to go ahead and pretend that I'm a final round judge. And I'm going to read the 7 finalists, and then I will kind of review each one, and then try to pick the winner. And we'll see if I manage that. Now, there are 6 weeks between them announcing the finalists and announcing the winner. So that's how long I have to read these 7 titles. So right now I'm just going to share the titles and what they are based on the little information I have. So first up is Farther Than the Moon, and this is by Lindsay Lackey. This is not one that was on my radar, so most of these, by the way, were not. I think of the ones that were finalists, I have only heard of 2 of them. What am I doing? I am way behind on what the big books are, honestly. That's fine. I had a lot going on in 2023. Not a big deal. So this one is about a kid who wants to be an astronaut, and they get accepted into a competitive junior astronaut recruitment program, but he can only do it if he can bring his little brother Robbie with him. So this is like about siblings, and Robbie has cerebral palsy and epilepsy. So this already sounds like something that I'm gonna enjoy. Like, this is exactly the kind of thing I'd like. So we're reading a book about a boy with big dreams and a brother with disabilities, and it says it's going to be heartfelt and profoundly moving. Next we have probably the one I'm assuming is going to be my least favorite. There's always one that I'm like, This one is Hands by Tori Maldonado, and the reason I am not super interested is because this is about boxing, and I just don't do sports. I don't enjoy reading about them. Sports is not a thing that I tend to read about or honestly even think about. So I don't know, but this one says it is a poetic page turner, and it is short, so it has that going for it. It's about a kid who wants to protect his mom and sisters from his stepdad. I'm assuming the stepdad is abusive, so he starts to learn how to box so he can handle him. But I guess this is a kid who's really talented with art, and people don't want him to waste his talent on something so violent. So I don't know. I'm not dismissing it entirely. Maybe this will surprise me, but I just generally don't like reading sports books. So I think like 2 years ago there was also a book that was like a basketball book, and it was fine, but like it definitely didn't really stick for me. And then we have No Place Like Home by James Bird. This one does sound like a book I'm gonna love. It has to do with homelessness. This is about a child who's living in a car because not every town has a shelter where the family can stay. So I guess we're following a boy, his brother, and their mother as they're trying to get to Los Angeles, where they hope that an uncle and a new life are waiting for them. So this is them kind of on a journey looking for a home. I feel like this is another one that I'm going to really, really love. last year? Was it last year? I think one of the finalists that, or no, last year one of the books I read for Cybils was also a story about homelessness, and it was one of my favorites. It didn't end up being a finalist, but it was really, really good. I can't remember the title. I'll try to put a picture, but I really enjoyed that one too. So I have good feelings about this. Then we have Simon Sort of Says by Erin Bow. This is one of the ones that I had heard of. I haven't read it, but it was on my radar. And this one says it's for fans of Kate DiCamillo, and it's a hilarious, wrenching, hopeful novel about finding your friends, healing your heart, and speaking your truth. This is about a boy named Simon, and he tends to make up a lot of stories about his family, and I guess the one that he wishes he didn't have to share about is that he is a survivor of gun violence. So this sounds like another one that I'm gonna really love. This is a breathtaking testament to the lasting echoes of trauma, the redemptive power of humor, and the courage it takes to move forward without forgetting the past. Okay, and then we have Tethered to Other Stars by Elisa Stone Lay, and this one says it's for fans of Ephraim Divided, which I did love, and it says, this is a luminous middle grade debut following a tween girls navigating the devastating impact of ICE's looming presence on her family and community. So this is another one that has to do with immigration and ICE. And like I said, I loved Ephraim Divided. I thought that was a really powerful middle grade story. So I have good feelings for this one. Next we have The Fire, the Water, and Maudie McGinn by Sally J. Pla. This one I had never heard of. And it says, neurodivergent Maudie is ready to spend an amazing summer with her dad, but will she find the courage to tell him a terrible secret about life with her mom and new stepdad? This contemporary novel by the award-winning author of The Someday Birds is a must-read for fans of Leslie Connor and Ali Standish. I love Ali Standish, so this has already piqued my interest. There's going to be a wildfire where they have to evacuate their beach town where her father grew up, and they're going to be living in the camper, navigating unfamiliar waters, making new friends. So it's an autistic main character and dealing with some kind of big secret about her mother and stepfather and building a relationship with her father. So it sounds interesting. Like, I'd never heard of this one, but I'm very intrigued by it. And then the last book I'll be reading for this video, the last finalist, is What Happened to Rachel Riley. This one's by Claire Swinarski. And I almost bought this book so many times because I'm so intrigued by what this one is about, but I never did buy it because I've been trying really hard not to buy extra things that I didn't really need. So this is an engrossing and inventive contemporary middle grade with a Me Too message about an 8th grader using social media posts, past notes, and other clues to find out why a formerly popular girl is now the new pariah of her school. I'm so intrigued by this one. It just sounds like this could be a really good story. We're following a character who is like a podcast enthusiast, and it's basically written to be like her making a podcast about this girl and what happened and why things are the way they are now, if I'm understanding it correctly. So like, I'm really interested in this one. So my rules for this, for myself, is I'm not allowed to buy any of these books until after I have read them, because I have a tendency to buy too many things. So I'm trying really hard this year in general not to do that. So I have been able to find almost all of them as audiobooks or library books. So I'll be doing that. I'll be using my audiobook services. I have several, and I will be using my library to access all of these books. I'll be reading them and sharing my thoughts with you guys as to whether or not I think that you should pick them up, who they're for. Like, I'll give you guys some guidelines on like who I think this book would be best for, recommendations wise. And at the end, I'm going to decide which one I would choose to win, and we will compare that with who actually wins, because I'm not a judge. I have no sway whatsoever on any of this, but I do want to like share my thoughts and feelings. So I'm going to be reading these 7 books over the next 6 weeks, and I will let you guys know my thoughts as I read them. By the time this goes up, the winner will probably have already been announced. I'm going to try to like get this up right after the winner's announced, so it'll be up like February 15th-ish, so I'm filming this right now on January 3rd. So let's get started. I'm going to pick up my first book, and I'll let you guys know my thoughts when I'm done. See you then. Hey everybody, I just finished reading Farther Than the Moon by Lindsay Lackey, and well, I thought this was so good. I understand why it was a finalist. This is a contemporary story about brothers. One, the older brother is really into space, wants to be an astronaut, like super smart, gets invited to do this like really intensive summer program with NASA. It's not so much a space camp that like anybody can go to. You have to be like accepted into it, almost like college. And so like it's a really intensive summer program that will eventually lead to like an internship for NASA and then later a job. So it's a really cool program. His younger brother Robbie has cerebral palsy and is disabled. He's in a wheelchair, he can't speak, he has a lot of seizures and things. So like he's profoundly disabled, and they have always been best of friends, and Houston, the older brother Houston, has always promised him that someday they'd go to space together. So that's like their thing. They both want to go to space together. And oh my gosh, this book gave me all of the emotions, all of the feelings. It's very heartwarming, very sweet, but also just very moving. The love these brothers have for each other. There's also a plot where like his grandfather is an astronaut, but they have no relationship because his mother like is angry with him over some things that happened to her and in their childhood and stuff. And so like the whole thing is just it's so good. It's so good. I just found it beautiful. I loved all the little friendships that Houston makes with his team while he's at this space camp thing. I loved the relationship with the brothers. I love how accepting everybody was of Robbie and like all of that. Like I adored this book. It was beautiful. Very well done. I loved it. So I'm like, okay, we're off to a good start. If they're all as good as this is going to be hard to narrow, but I'm up for the challenge. So I don't know what I'm going to read next. I have a lot of things to get through otherwise, but yeah, this first book was fantastic. Absolute 5-star read. Something I wonder with books like this one in particular is I read a lot of middle grade, and there are books that I read that I'm like, wow, kids will love this. And there are books that I read that I'm like, I love this. Parents will love this. And like, I wonder if this one in particular is more a book that parents will love, because while it is heartwarming and sweet, I don't know. Perhaps if you have a child who is very into space, loves the idea of being an astronaut someday, because like the ins and outs of the program, and like there's tons of like factoids and information about space travel, about being an astronaut, what they do at the camp, you know, all of those kind of things. Like there's a trivia contest. So like there's a lot of information. So if you have a child, I think, who's very into space, this could be a book that they would love. But a lot of the aspects of the story with like the friendships, but specifically the family dynamics and stuff, I feel like that's almost more geared towards adults and what adults would want to read in a middle grade story. Like I've read middle grade that I felt was more for like adults. Like there have been books that I read that I'm like, would a child enjoy this? Or is this for an adult who thinks that this is what middle grade should be? So like, I'm wondering if this is one that would appeal to children as much as it would appeal to adults. Moving on, I'll pick up my next book. I don't know what it's going to be, but you're going to find out really soon. So I just finished reading my second Cybils finalist. I read The Fire, the Water, and Maudie McGinn by Sally J. Pla. This was, again, really, really good. So this is a story about an autistic girl who is visiting her father for the summer. During the year, she lives with her mother and her stepfather, and then she spends the summers with her father. Her parents were never married, I don't think. And so she's just always lived with this arrangement. And her mother is an influencer. She's like a beauty YouTuber, I think, something along those lines. And so she's very upbeat, very sparkly personality and that kind of thing when people are around. But on her own, she's very different from that persona. And the stepfather is abusive. And the mother is trying to just like pretend that's not happening, because if she doesn't talk about it, it doesn't like admit it, then it isn't happening. And so Maudie is spending the summer with her father and starting to like come to some realizations about her life, and she's trying to work up the bravery to tell her father this big secret, because she's not supposed to talk about her abusive stepfather. This book had moments that were really frustratingly hard to read. The abuse that Maudie was dealing with isn't just from the stepfather, it was her mother as well, who is just like, why can't you be normal? And like trying to force her into this like persona that she thinks her daughter should be. And it talks too about how her mother uses her for content, which, oh my God, I have so many thoughts on that. I don't appreciate, I don't like that. I feel very strongly that our children are not content. Like we shouldn't be using them for that purpose. Anyway, this book had a lot of like hard topics, but I think it was done in a really, really good way. I feel like this is a very approachable book. This book, it would be perfect for, one, introducing children to the idea of what autism is, because I think it does a good job of explaining autism and how that works and what that means as far as like how people's brains are different. I think it does a really good job of making it not seem like this big scary thing, which for a person who's autistic, I think that would be really nice to see too. I think this is one of those windows and mirrors kind of books. Like it works for both. I think this book handles abuse really well. It's not done in a way that I think would be like scary for children to read, while also making it obvious that this is a dangerous thing, and like if it's happening to you, you should say something. You know what I mean? So it's not something that I think would be like, I think a sensitive child could handle reading this, but I would say this works better as a read aloud rather than a read alone, because I feel like you would want to be there to discuss all of the things happening in this book. Most of the books, I think, too, for finalists, tend to be books that I think would work better as read alouds, because then you can talk about all these things, because there's usually a lot of like heavier topics, a lot of big things like that you would want to talk about as you read. And this definitely has that. I loved the setting. I thought the idea of like spending the summer on this like beach type place was great. It talks too about a little bit about homelessness, but not specifically that, because there is a wildfire that happens at the beginning of the book, and so her father loses his cabin that he lives in, and they have to go and like stay somewhere else for a while, but where they're staying ends up being a place that Maudie feels the most at home. This book was really beautiful. I really enjoyed it. 5 stars. I'm going to have a hard time. I don't know how to narrow these down. If I'm going to try to decide who I think is the winner. I've only read 2, and I don't know if like one of them's better than another. They're both really good. So, on to the next book. I finished No Place Like Home by James Bird this morning. So I thought, let's chat about it while it's still fresh in my mind. I loved this book. I kind of want to stop here and just go, yeah, that's the one. This is the winner. I don't know how anything else is going to top it, honestly. This book hit so many things. It's so beautifully done. This is a story about a family who is homeless. So we're following a mother and her two sons. They are indigenous. They are Ojibwe. And so you get a lot of stuff in the story about what it's like to be indigenous, what it's like to try to hold on to that culture when the country that you live in doesn't want you to. So there's a lot of stuff about that in the story. What I loved about this was the main character that we're following, Opine. Oh my gosh, this little donut of a child. He's the sweetest thing ever, and I just like fell absolutely in love with him. He is wonderful. I love reading books with characters who are such little cinnamon roll positive forces of nature, and that is what Opine is in this story. The way he views everything is just like the sweetest thing. So his mother has raised him to be strong, to understand why they're on the run, sort of, and like why they don't have a place to live. And he sees the positive in everything. And I love that in a character in middle grade. I think that's necessary when you're reading middle grade, to have a way to look at things that are awful. Like, we're reading about things that are definitely not good, but the way he's looking at the world is just, it's beautiful. I loved that. I loved him. I love his mother. I think she's a really fascinating character, because when you're reading it as an adult, you understand what's happening, and you immediately get why her older son is so angry, why she does what she does. And like, oh, it's just, this book was so, I can't even stand how good it was. The writing was really good. I listened to the audiobook. The audiobook is excellent. Highly recommend that. So I've been journaling. I've been journaling my thoughts, and like for these books, I'm just doing like kind of like touch points for each one. So I wrote down that this has great indigenous representation, that it's about homelessness. It has a lot of heavy topics. It's very emotional. Like, you will feel things. This book made my heart hurt, but also brought me so much joy. I love that a big element of the story is learning that not everybody is terrible, that there are good people in the world. And like, that alone, I think that's such an important message. It is so easy with a story like this to dwell on like the horrible fact that they're homeless. They don't have the money or the means to have a steady place, that they live in a car, that they're constantly on the move. And like, that is tragic. But like, I love the elements of the story in which they're finding people who are like showing Opine, showing his mother, that not everything is as bad as it can be. Like, there are good people. There are people willing to help. And I loved that. And like I said, Opine is just such a little donut. He's so sweet. He's adorable. I loved him throughout the story, like, making the best out of the worst situations. Like, talking about how all he wants is 11 walls, and how all he wants is a bed to sleep in, and like things like that. Like, those are the blessings that he sees in his life. And I just, I want to give him such a big hug. So 5 stars, easy 5 stars. Like, I can't imagine that anything I'm going to read after this is going to top that. I feel like this is the winner. This is the one. This is it. If you're going to read one middle grade this year, pick up No Place Like Home by James Bird. Highly recommend. So I finished Hands by Tori Maldonado, and I admit I went into this with a slightly negative outlook. I knew this had to do with boxing, and I just don't really do sports books. That's not a thing that I've typically enjoyed. But I will say that this is not as focused on the boxing as I feared. And and I feel like it's a very approachable book. And so this is a story about a boy who is dealing with some rough things at home. He lives in a bad neighborhood. Gangs are prevalent. He has family members who have been in gangs. And so he's got this very outlook on life where he feels like he needs to be able to fight. And at the start of the story, we know that his stepfather has just gone to jail for hitting his mother. And so he wants to learn to fight so he can protect his mother and sisters. And over the course of the story, he learns that fighting's only one way of dealing with things, and it's often not the best way. And so he's learning other ways to use his hands. And one of those is art. He's a talented artist, and people are trying to encourage him. What I loved about this is the way that the author shows that we're not alone, that we have people rooting for us. I love all the different family and friends that we see throughout the story that are helping the main character learn to be better, learn to do better than what has happened before him, learn to elevate his life and that sort of thing. I loved that. I love all the different characters were great. I feel like you get a really good picture of the neighborhood, of the family in his life, of his friends. I feel like they all have really distinct voices too. And it's such a short book. There's a lot that happens in this tiny book. The chapters are all super short. I think my only real complaint is that it feels a little bit choppy. Yes, it packs a lot in this one book, but it felt like it could have done even more. There could have been just a little bit more, and I would have appreciated. Even if this was just 200 pages, I think it's just over 100. It's 130 something. I feel like maybe just a little bit more would have been nice, but I did enjoy it. I gave this 4 stars. So I thought it might be kind of fun. I'm halfway at this point. There are 7 finalists. I have read 4 of them. So I want to give a little bit of a ranking as of right now. So let me consult my handy dandy notebook where I've been writing these down. So I think if I were to rank these, Hands would be number 4 right now. It was good, but not as good as the other books that I've read. So I would say Hands would be number 4. Then I would say The Fire, the Water, and Maudie McGinn. Farther Than the Moon would be 2, and No Place Like Home is in the number 1 slot. And I feel pretty good about that ranking. I still have 3 books to go, though, and I'm wondering if something is going to take the slot for number 1, but I feel No Place Like Home is almost a perfect book. It's so good. It's so good. And I don't know how anything could top it. So, I'm excited to find out, though. I still have 3 books to go. I need to read more and see, but this is my ranking as of now. So, on to the next book. So I just finished listening to the audiobook for What Happened to Rachel Riley, and that is by Claire Swinarski. And let me tell you, the best way to do this is audio, because this book is set up like a podcast. So the plot of this one is this girl, Anna, is starting at a new middle school, and she is trying to get to know people, and she finds out that this one girl is being ostracized. She used to be really popular, and now nobody will talk to her, and no one will tell her why. She's taking a social history type class. What is it called? I don't remember now. But the class is set up to be current events and that sort of thing, and they're assigned an essay where she has to do a project. And she decides, because she loves podcasts and she wants to do her own podcast someday, that she's going to do a podcast trying to investigate what happened to this girl, Rachel Riley, who was being ostracized. And the teacher's like, no, you can't do that. That you can't do a project about another student. That could be constituted as harassment. Like, she might be upset by it. Like, no. But she decides, like, there's this contest she wants to enter to, like, she has to do a podcast for that. So she's going to do it anyway in her free time. So she starts, like, investigating and asking all these questions, and it leads her to discover what actually happened. This book was so good, though. Like, I loved the podcast element. I thought that was really clever, and I thought it was done really well. I loved the message of this book, which is essentially, this is like a Me Too book. This is about boys harassing girls and the things that the girls do to stand up for themselves and that get the girls into trouble and not the boys. And so, and like the system that's set up to protect the boys, and like it's just boys being boys. That's what boys do, and that sort of thing. And it's done so well. Like, I feel like this is a book you should hand to every child. Like, boys need to read this book just as much as girls do. I don't know. I loved this. I thought this was really well done. Excellent story. Like, the storytelling is great. Like, I hate when books are written with a message and the story's not enough to hold the message up. You know, it gets boring and it just feels repetitive and like it's beating you over the head. That's not what this was at all. This was a really compelling story. Like, I was invested in this whole, like, podcast investigation. I was right there with Anna, like, wanting to ask more questions, wanting to figure out why these girls are just accepting what's happening. And why they wouldn't stand up for the girl who's standing up for them. Like, I wanted to, like, know everything. Like, the kids are all very realistic. Like, I felt like it was done in a way that felt authentic. Like, this is absolutely how kids are. And I thought it was excellent. Like, I remember boys being like this. Like, I assume they still are. And, like, what are you supposed to do? Like, when you're a kid and you tell somebody about it, they absolutely, the adults do not help. They tell you that, oh, he just likes you. And, like, well, if he likes me, can he stop being a jerk? Like, why would you say that? Like, that's not helpful advice. So I thought this book did a really great job of, like, telling girls that, yes, you absolutely can and should stand up for yourself. You do not have to take that. You do not have to let boys touch you when you do not want them to. You don't have to let boys talk to you when you don't want them to. Like, you can say no. And it is totally acceptable. And in fact, it is your right to do so. Like, don't let anybody else tell you you have to take that. Loved that message so much. So this 5 stars. This gets all the stars. I don't know what to do now. This has upended my whole ranking system. So this is maybe now my favorite book. I don't know. I have 2 more books to get through, but like I feel like right now it's really a tie between No Place Like Home and What Happened to Rachel Riley. Both of those have been just absolutely stellar books. Like, I want everyone to read those 2 books. They're so good. Like, excellent middle grade. But, like, honestly, these are middle grade books, yes, but I feel like those 2 especially are middle grade books that have universal appeal. I feel like a wide age range. Like, I'm an adult. I'm in my 40s, and I was riveted by both of these books. Like, I think they're just really good stories. So, you know, middle grade is for everybody. I don't agree that it's children's literature. Yes, it is. It is written for children, sure, just like YA is written for teens, but also I love it. It makes me feel so many emotions, just as many emotions as an adult book would. So, like, I don't know. If you want to read middle grade, don't feel bad about it. Don't feel like you're reading something too easy. A good story is a good story. All right, I'm going to try to read Simon Sort of Says next. I don't have the audio, so I'm going to have to just read this with my eyeballs, but I think I can do it. I finished reading Simon Sort of Says by Erin Bow, and I expected to like this more than I did, so I'm slightly disappointed, so that's going to color my review, but I don't know why. Like, I can't really explain what it was specifically that I did not enjoy as much, but I ended up giving this 4 stars. I didn't hate it. I don't think it was a bad book or anything like that. It's just like the story never fully came together for me, and I don't know. I can't quite pinpoint what that was. But this is a story about a boy who survives a school shooting, and he and his family move to a new town in their state, like a far from the city type of place. They came from the city. They want to go someplace where no one's going to know them or recognize them. And the appeal of this new town is that they have no internet access there. So he's like, great, no one can Google me. I can just hide here. And so the story is about overcoming trauma and like learning to cope and deal with something awful that you have been through, and what that looks like from the perspective of the child who was, went through the trauma, but also like his parents, and like how he learns to explain what happened to him, how he learns to deal with the fact that that is a thing he's going to have to live with forever, that people will always know him as that awful thing he went through. What I did like was the friendships. I thought the friendships in this story were some of the best that I've seen done. Like, I just thought they were really, really great in that they modeled really well, like how to be a good friend, how to like handle differences in other people in a respectful and kind way. I appreciated what the author did with that. But I don't know that I loved like the story overall. I felt there was a lot to be desired in like the actual plot of the story. And I think that's probably why I ended up giving it 4 stars and not 5. Because I just feel like this book meandered a lot, and I didn't feel like the plot was enough to hold my interest. Like, this one took me days to get through because I just thought, it's middle grade, it'll fly by, but it didn't. I got like stuck somewhere in the middle, but I finished it. So that one got 4 stars. I think that's probably somewhere towards the bottom of my list now. I have 1 book left. I'm going to read Tethered to Other Stars later this week, and I will let you guys know my thoughts, and then we'll wait and see. Like, it's almost time. Valentine's Day, February 14th is when they announce the winner, and I feel like I still need to read the last book, but I feel like I know which book is going to win. Like, right now, if I was choosing, I'm kind of torn between 2 books, which I told you guys before. I'm torn between this one and this one, between No Place Like Home and What Happened to Rachel Riley, because I think both of those are just excellent books. Like, those are the best books that I've read for this so far. Like, I think they're both amazing and they both deserve to win, but which one will, I don't know. So I'm going to read the last book. Maybe that one's going to blow everything out of the water. I have no idea what to expect because I don't know this author. I've never read from them before. So I'm excited to read it and let you guys know my thoughts. So I finished Tethered to Other Stars. And this is by Elisa Stoneley. And I already had to take it back to the library, so I don't have it to show you. I'll put a picture. But I really liked this. This is a story about a girl whose family is from El Salvador, I believe. And she's always lived in America. She was born in America. And they lived in, I want to say, South Carolina. And then suddenly had to move. And her father's like always trying to keep everyone like quiet. You don't need to stand out. Don't stand out in the crowd. Don't talk to anybody. Don't make anyone notice you because that could be dangerous for us. And she's never really understood why he's like that, because she knows that her father was born in America. Like, he's American and her mother is not. But in her mind, like, what is their big secret? And so you find out over the course of the story what that secret is. But also this has a lot to do with like ICE and immigration and xenophobia, a lot of that, and racism. What I loved about this was just the writing was really captivating, And I feel like this book was super relatable. Like, I feel like even though I've never been in that situation, like, I felt somehow like I got it. I don't know. I'm not explaining that well, but like it felt the writing made it really relatable and easy to follow and understand, and like put yourself into that position to understand what that must be like. I loved the friend group. I thought this is one of those books where diversity was used so incredibly well. Sometimes it can feel forced. This is not one of those. This felt like super authentic. The friend group is very diverse. Like, you've got a Korean American, a girl who wears a hijab. You have the Latinx characters. You have a black character. So like, and they all are in this very elite middle school that is like science-based. And I loved the focus on the science because I always enjoy reading about girls in science. That's just a thing that I like. I can't explain why. I'm not a girl in science, but I like reading about it. So I really like that aspect. I wish I could remember everyone's name because I took the book back. I don't have it in front of me anymore. But the main character, the main girl, is really into astronomy. And so she starts designing this amazing science project for her class to enter the science fair. There's a whole plot about like the mean kids at school being incredibly racist and rude, and like over the course of the story, she kind of learns how to like stand up for herself. Like, she's so used to like having to like hide herself and be quiet and just take it because that's what her father's always instructed her to do. And over the course of the story, she like learns that, you know, she doesn't have to. She can be her own person. She can stand up for herself and do the thing that feels best for her. I really enjoyed this. I thought, like I said, the writing is great. I'm probably going to buy a copy of it. I don't own any of the books that were nominated this year, and I think this might be one that I purchase for my home library, as well as I really want to buy a copy of No Place Like Home and What Happened to Rachel Riley. Those are my 3 favorites. So, like, let's talk about that now. So, I have them all written down here. Let me rank, because tomorrow is when they announce the winners. And I need to figure out who I think the winner is going to be. So I am going to organize my favorites for you guys, because like I feel fairly confident in my top 3. One of those is the winner. I can't decide for myself which one I would choose, but my top 3. Number 1 is No Place Like Home. Number 2 is going to be Tethered to Other Stars. And number 3 is going to be What Happened to Rachel Riley. Those are like top tier, amazing middle grade literature that I would recommend to anyone. So those are my top recommendations out of this. Like, they were all good, don't get me wrong, but those, top tier, amazing. Then I would go Farther Than the Moon, The Fire, the Water, and Maudie McGinn, Hands, and Simon Sort of Says. That's my ranking. So I don't know who the winner's gonna. If I had to, if you like forced me to choose, I would go with No Place Like Home. I think that is the book that I would pick to win. But like I said, any of those top 3 are winners. I feel like any one of those I would be happy with if that was the winner. So I'm excited to see. We're going to come back tomorrow and I will live see who the winner was, and we'll be surprised together. Okay guys, it's time. It is now just after 12 o'clock noon, which is when the Cybils Awards are announced. I am just now tuning in to see the winners. So let's see if one of my 3 favorites won. Okay, so let's scroll and see who the winners are. So that's Board Book, Fiction Picture Book, Easy Reader. Let's get down to middle grade because that's the category I'm working with. Oh, but I just saw that elementary middle grade speculative fiction winner was The Grace of Wild Things, which I read last year and loved, so that was exciting to catch that. Okay, I'm like so anxious. Okay, middle grade fiction winner is Simon Sort of Says, which actually surprises me a little bit. Because that is not what I would have chosen. That was my least favorite of the entire group. I wonder what the discussion was like choosing that as the winner. Very interesting. So Simon Sort of Says won, which I wonder why. Like, I didn't hate it. It's not a bad book by any means. Like, I gave it 4 stars. I just didn't think it was as good as the other books, but I can see topically why that might resonate the most with modern day middle grade readers, with their parents, with people working with children. I can see it. I just don't agree that that was the best book. Interesting. That is not the book I would have picked. I think my options for winner were better. If I were a judge, I would have been fighting hard for those 3 books because they were superior in every way. And that's just my opinion. I will definitely be judging next year, and I will be pushing my thoughts on what I think should be. I don't do the final round judging because I don't know that I could handle that amount of stress because you have to read so much in such a short amount of time, and you don't get to like decide. I would rather decide on what I think should be in the finals rather than decide on what the winner should be, you know? Anyway, I can understand conceptually why that might be the winning book, but like if you look at story, if you look at literary value, if you look at all of those things, I think they were better. There were better choices. You can't win them all. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. This was 6 weeks of my life working on this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I gave you some great new options to add to your children's library to read with your kids. I hope that you pick up some of these books because they were all legitimately good books. Like, did I have my favorites? Yes. But like all of them were good. So I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of them, what your thoughts are. If there's a book that I've mentioned that you're excited to pick up, I would love to hear about that. So if you like this video, give it a like, subscribe for more content, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.